Welcome to part 3 of the Rena Aguilar Bernie Swartz case. As a reminder, topics may be triggering. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Parties are innocent until proven guilty in court. Brian goes back inside the house, grabs Rena's keys, and gives them to Brian. Brian drives off with Rena's car and stops when he notices James is not following him. James pulls up with the van and orders him to get in. Brian once again does what he is told, leaves Rena's car, and gets into the van and notices Rena is not there. James drives away in a rage, saying, "That bitch would not die. I stabbed her and she would not die." Neighbors hear the commotion and find Rena somewhat propped up on a stack of newspapers on the front porch of her house. 911 is called, police and ambulance arrives, and she is taken to a hospital in Richmond. Sadly, Rena succumbed to her injuries at around 2 a.m. The autopsy report indicated stab wounds on her chest, stomach, and head. Some wounds were so deep they penetrated into her back. Injuries on her neck indicated she was choked by a gold chain around her neck. More injuries indicated falling out of a moving vehicle into the pavement. She also had defensive wounds. Pinole Police Officer Hodge is dispatched, sees the van, and chases them. The van stopped at Merritt Ave, where James and Brian get out. And guess who lives on Merritt Ave? Guy Odell, who is Brian's older brother and James's other nephew. He lives on Merritt Ave with his wife, Michelle. James and Brian arrive unannounced and uninvited to their home at 1 a.m. James quickly closes the curtains, asks for a shirt, and tells them that he strangled and hit someone with a tire iron because she was a snitch that would not die. About 15 minutes go by and he leaves and heads to Michelle Odell's mom's house, where Patricia Hart lived with a roommate named Cleona Bennett. Brian was already at Patricia's home when James arrived at around 1:45 a.m. Cleona hears James tell Brian that he killed Rena because she was going to snitch on him about the van, and he wanted to do the same to William Morgan. Somehow, they let James spend the night, and the following morning, he makes his way to Guy and Michelle Odell's house again. William Morgan went to Guy and Michelle's house as well later that day, where he hears James bragging and joking to everyone that he kept stabbing Rena and she would not die. Michelle warned William, telling him he should leave. William was scared of James and hid at various hotels until James was apprehended. Later that day, James writes some eloquent letters. "I, James Richard Odell, I done the crime early this morning alone. No one helped me. No one did nothing to me. I am a loner and a rebel. I, James R. Odell, signed this." I was laughing so hard when I read this because I have ADHD, but also he sounded like a complete idiot. And the second letter read, "I, James Richard Odell, I stole the 76 Chevy van by myself. No one else knew it was stolen. I also did the crime done early this morning, alone and no help, no nothing. No one knew anything I did, and I am a rebel and a loner, and no one even knows what I'm doing or even done. I, James Richard Odell, wrote this in case anything happens to me. I am gone. Find me, punk." You cannot make this ish up. On the second day of Rena's murder, James steals a 1966 truck and drove to Nevada, where he was welcomed with open arms to a mobile home of Kathy's uncle. He then goes to a neighbor's and trades a stereo for a wooden rifle. On the third day after Rena's murder, James returns to California, where about 4 p.m. he stops and robs a store in Roseville. He meets up with Michelle Odell's brother, Billy Hart, and his friend Mark Casey, shows them his wooden rifle, and says, "They ain't gonna take me alive." That morning, the Pinole police receive a call about a man driving around with a wooden rifle in a truck Witnesses also reported seeing this truck parked outside of Kathy and Rena's home. Later that morning, detectives see three men go into Kathy and Rena's home. Detectives call for backup and search the house. James sees this happening and gets into the truck and drives away. Officer Floyd Swartz, who goes by Bernie, and his partner Donald Donahue find the truck parked in a residential area. They climb fences looking for the criminal. Officer Donahue finds James hiding in a bush holding his rifle. Officer Donahue pulls out his revolver and calls to Officer Swartz, letting him know that he's found the coward. Several hours go by, and several more officers come and stood in position behind the officers. The officers tried talking James into surrender, but he stated that he was not going back to prison. The officers who had come to provide backup had left the area to block off potential escape routes. James stood up, faced Officer Swartz, and fired his wooden rifle at him. Officer Swartz died of a single gunshot wound that entered the left side of his neck, near his chest, and exited out of the right side of his back. Officer Swartz died a hero. Officer Swartz died a hero protecting the Bay Area from predators like James Odell. Contra Costa SWAT is called. Several hours and more shots at other police officers later, James finally surrenders, but with only a scrape to his forearm. Deputy Updegraff puts him in handcuffs and searched him. Poor little baby James was complaining of a small little boo-boo about a scrape on his arm from a gun that brushed him. James Odell was already a career criminal at this point. In 1971, he shot a man in the booty, resulting in a misdemeanor battery conviction. In 1972, he committed first-degree armed commercial burglary. In 1976, another armed robbery and grand theft auto. In 1980, another burglary, resulting in substantial injuries to another victim. On the day of Rena's murder, James showed his buddy William and nephew a pipe bomb that he planned to put on Kathy's husband's car, causing him to die, and Kathy would receive an insurance money. This was a plan. It never happened. On July 15th of 1983, James Richard Odell was convicted of the senseless murders of Rena Aguilar and Officer Bernie Swartz. 2 weeks later, he was sentenced to die at St. Quentin's gas chamber. He was on death row.